Good afternoon. My name is Art Dunal, and I'm a board member and a vice president at Polish-American Chamber of Commerce in Texas. It is my honor to welcome you today to the Thought Leadership Series event. Thought Leadership events have been our in-person events held here in Houston for the past 2 years. These events allowed us to meet with members and friends to discuss current leadership issues. This time, as a virtual event, we are delighted to welcome many more friends from across the country and around the world. Thank you all for joining us. Today, in honor of Saint Barbara's Day, the patron saint of mining and geoscience, Polish-American Chamber of Commerce in Texas partnered with the Consulate General of the Republic of Poland in Houston, the Polish-American Council of Texas, Texas A&M Polish Association, and the Polish Investment and Trade Agency in Houston to bring this valuable insight to you virtually. Thank you all for your ongoing partnership. Before we will begin, I would like to remind you that you can submit your questions using the chat function. Q&A session will follow the talk. Please make sure to stay on mute. Today, we are founder and president of Merrimack International, a retained executive search firm serving clients across the energy industry. Mary has over 25 years of experience across multiple industries in leadership roles. Following several years in leadership positions in finance, Mary joined a global executive search firm in the energy industry, assisting in growing the company internationally from both the London and Houston offices. She then joined FWB Park Brown as managing director of Houston, growing it to a well-established business over 5 years before purchasing the North America business and creating Merrimack International. Mary has placed hundreds of executives in leadership roles over this time frame and works closely with CEOs across multiple industries, including technology, industrial services, manufacturing, transportation, EPC, and energy. She has particularly strong expertise across all sectors of the energy industry in the US, Middle East, Canada, Europe, Africa, and Asia. Mary is a board member of the British American Business Council of Texas, as well as a member of the Polish-American Chamber of Commerce in Texas, the Society of Petroleum Engineers, the Society of Underwater Technology, and the Association for Corporate Growth. She is also an active supporter of Impact a Hero and the British American Foundation of Texas. It is indeed a great pleasure to introduce Ms. Mary McIntyre.
Thank you, Art, and that's a really kind introduction. I appreciate it. I just want to say I'm quite honored that you asked me to speak, and hopefully what I share today is going to be informative, and I do really hope that we have a good Q&A afterwards as well. I did want to just kind of first, in case someone's wondering what my connection with Poland is, because this is a Polish event, and McIntyre is not a very Polish name. I am actually half Polish on my father's side, and my great-grandparents all came from Poland. So I do have a Polish background, just in case you were wondering. Just what I thought might be good today is to kind of, we're going to talk about what companies want from leaders today, what they're looking for when they hire new leaders, but I thought it would be good to kind of just talk about where we were a year ago and how much the world has changed since then. So I went and did a little search. What were the top headlines in the first week of December 2019? We were talking about China trade wars, NATO meetings in Europe, and impeachment hearings. And that was the top headlines a year ago, first week in December. The other thing that happened in the first week of December is the very first confirmed case of COVID was confirmed in China, in Wuhan. So it really wasn't even on our radar a year ago when we think about that. So little did we know, right? 4 months later, we'd be in this pandemic, global economic downturn, and a continuing falling price of oil, and that it would only get worse over time, and that the stresses on all of us and companies would grow dramatically. So, I mean, obviously been a difficult year for everyone, and many have suffered much more than others. But we're all striving to move forward, right? We all want to keep moving, and we have to. So with that said, what are some of the struggles that companies and leaders have had to deal with over the last year? Because it's important to know these, because that's why maybe things have changed in what they're looking for going forward. Obviously, global pandemic, including impact to their own employees. So companies dealing with that, but also potentially having employees stricken with this illness or even died, which is pretty awful. New ways of working, right? We have working from home, new ways of using technologies, video conferences and webinars like this. And then dealing with the effects of isolation, right? You've got a workforce that, as people, we are programmed to be social beings and to be around other people, and many people are completely isolated now. So that makes things difficult, and also affects morale, which is a bit lower, and employees dealing with new stresses that they never had to before, whether that's caring for a loved one who's ill or who cannot receive the care they normally receive, or homeschooling children, being a teacher and doing your day job, or whatever it might be. There's lots and lots of examples. But those are all new stresses that we didn't have to deal with before, and that companies and employers didn't have to deal with before. And then, of course, just diminished revenue and the economic stress on companies. So all of these are things that are new in a different way than we ever had to deal with before, and have impacted companies greatly. So companies, how have they handled it, right? They're still placing heavy expectations on their leadership. Many companies have taken some government aid and hunkered down, and they're keeping their current leaders, and they're focused on still pressuring for bigger cuts on cost and improved performance as best you can, and expecting their leaders to do whatever they need to do to get those returns. And that's a huge stress, and that really doesn't change company to company, industry to industry. It's all still there. And what we've seen is that different leaders manage that in different ways, or approach it in different ways, which results in different and outcomes. So what I thought might be helpful for everyone is just to give you a sense of what we're seeing in that regard. Look, different leaders handle things differently. We talk with a lot of leaders every day. Merrimack International, as Art mentioned, is an executive search firm. So we're talking with top leaders across the industry every day. And what I've found is that there are some leaders who are doing things that just help them through this situation a bit better. They're handling it with a little less stress, and they're approaching it a little differently, which gives them just a little bit better results than others. In the energy industry, it's hard for everyone. So I'm not saying that people that will be exhibiting these behaviors are necessarily knocking it out of the park. What I'm saying is they're creating a bit better situation for their teams and a little bit better performance. It might be just breaking even. It might not be that even, but managing that cash flow just right. But they're just managing a little bit better. So I just thought I would share a few of the thoughts on that, of what I see in the leaders who are doing just a little bit better. Some of the common traits and actions. So the first thing I would say is those that have been a bit more successful, they were assessing the situation early. They were on top of it quickly, and they were acting quickly. Whether that, they were adopting changes faster in terms of work from home, or remote technology, or video conferencing, or taking early anti-COVID measures. So putting those safety things in place. If it was in manufacturing, spacing it, redesigning that space between stations, sanitization efforts, PPE equipment, updating their safety procedures. And so they were just on it a little bit faster. And then taking advantage of government assistance or low cost loans, low interest loans or PPP, or utilizing the educational information that was out there, staying on top of that. A lot of them put committees together early so that they could address things as they came up, because information was changing day to day. And they maintained open lines of communication all the way throughout, whether that was upwards to their management, downwards to their teams, outwards to the market or their stakeholders. They're just being open and approachable and transparent in their communication. And I think one of the other things they did is they expressed true concern for their employees and their customers and what they were going through as well. Not just what that person as a leader was dealing with. And then some of them were able to get their employees and their teams involved in that change and coming up with new ideas on how to work, how to get in front of clients, how to just pivoting and adjusting, instead of just bearing that all on their own shoulders. They got ideas and got the team involved. So I just thought it would be helpful to share with you a little bit why those leaders maybe did something a little bit different, and why they were just a little bit more successful in working through the last 10 months. So what companies are hiring and why? Because obviously there's many companies who aren't hiring at all. They've cut all costs, they've cut all hiring, they're in a freeze. They're staying with their current leadership, they're hunkering down, they've gotten the aid they need, and they're just gonna work to survive through this and prepare for a better 2021. That's happening for sure. So there's definitely fewer jobs out there. But some factors are requiring companies to continue to hire leaders at the top levels. So let me give you a bit of what we're seeing, why we're still filling these jobs. So some of them, and particularly in the energy industry, are results of retiring professionals. These are individuals who've been in the industry 30, 35, 40 plus years. We've all been talking about a shift change in the energy industry for the last 10 years. But I think it's finally happening, right? These leaders who stayed in it and they just said, well, I got through the last downturn. I've got a little bit more in me. I'm going to keep going. And they're finally saying, okay, enough is enough. I'm ready to go. But they haven't got a succession plan in place. So they're coming to us to help them find those next leaders to take that place. So that's one. Restructuring, there's lots of restructuring going on, lots of consolidation, and that often will result in combining business units, combining functions, and needing a leader who can handle multiple things. And perhaps their current leadership doesn't have that ability to step up into that larger, broader role. And so that sometimes creates a position that we need to bring from outside to fill. And then there's the opportunity to upgrade talent. So in a crisis situation, in a downturn, many times you've got really good leaders, but they haven't faced adversity necessarily, and may not have the right skill set to help move a company through that crisis or adversity. I equate this a lot to football, American football, clear. And in American football, you've got, every team has their playbook. And sometimes you have a quarterback who just doesn't fit that playbook. It's not a bad quarterback, he just doesn't fit that team's playbook. And you've got to get rid of him and get someone who does. That's a bit like companies in a downturn. that quarterback may have been great as things were moving along in 18 and 19, but not the right quarterback, not the right president, CEO for what we're going through in 2020 and beyond. And they just need to change it up. So we help with things like that. And that's where we're seeing continued work for executive search. So hopefully that helps a little bit. So what are companies looking for when they're hiring these new leaders? This is what I wanted to spend a bit more time about because I think it'll be helpful. Some things haven't changed. There's certain things that no matter what the environment is, it's needed in an adverse situation, or any kind of company, any situation. And that is specifically strategic and commercial acumen. You've got to have strategic and commercial acumen. What I would say has changed just a little bit over the last year is that more and more of our customers are asking for a track record of having done that through either a downturn or a restructuring or a crisis situation or a adverse situation. Maybe it was a turnaround that they've done before, but the ability to have creative thinking, flexibility, and still that strategic mindset and apply it to unprecedented events. And how do you move your business through that? Just to give you an example, we've had a couple clients in the last year ask specifically for strategic and commercial acumen in leaders who have dealt with major crisis. So some of the leaders that we brought forward didn't necessarily mean they had crisis recently, but maybe they worked through the Enron crisis, right? That was a very major adverse event that there were some good people having to work through and carry it through to the end. The BP Macondo incident, people who had to work through that crisis and pull a company forward and adapt and adjust and change. Those were the kinds of things those are really major events. It doesn't have to be that big, but that just gives you an example of the kind of experiences companies might be looking for in that leader, someone who's gone through that kind of crisis. The second one is the ability to motivate and empower a team. So this is really leadership skills, right? But it's taking it a bit further. How are you empowering to a specific leadership style of empowerment? So having that positive attitude to see beyond the current situation. It doesn't mean someone is not realistic about what's going on. It's that they can be realistic about what's going on, form a strategy to address it with the end goal in sight, that there is more after this, that we will get through it, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and how do we get there? And then sharing that with the team and getting them to believe that too. It's not a doomsday message, it's a hopeful message. And involving the team in that long-term vision, involving that team in what the purpose of the company is and how you're going to get there. Being visible to their teams, not putting their head in the sand, right? But being open and approachable and visible, providing resources and support to that team so that they can get done what they need to get done without micromanaging. Creating and maintaining that strong, positive culture, trusting people to do their job and do it well. So it's that motivate and empower piece, that type of leader that they're looking for. Communication skills. Again, this is one that is always important. What I think has been highlighted in this skill set that our clients are looking for is that ability to communicate at all levels. So internally, that might be upwards, communicating the reality of the situation with a clear plan forward and being able to do that in a way that everyone understands and trusts. So whether that's your board of directors or your shareholders or your major stakeholders, but being able to convey that message in that way within your team, within your organization, it's being able to communicate clearly the message that you're trying to get across. the vision, the purpose, the expectations, but being clear and open with that communication of what's happening in the company and how are you addressing it. Maintaining an open door policy and being approachable from a communication standpoint, having two-way communication, inviting questions and inviting employees and any stakeholder to come and talk about it. And then answering those questions in a timely way, right? Not BSing, right, your way through it, but being, hey, if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know the answer, but being very clear, open, honest communication. And probably one of the more important things that we haven't talked about a lot in the past with our clients, but we talk about more now, is the listening aspect of communication at all levels, listening to the public, listening to your shareholders, to your board, to your employees, but really listening and hearing what people are saying and feeling and doing, and helping them know you're hearing them. So that's become a bigger part of communication. It always has been important, but we just talk about it more now. And then probably the most important thing that I would say wasn't something our clients asked us a lot for in the past specifically. They wanted it, but they didn't necessarily make it their top 5, is now definitely part of the top 5, and that is emotional intelligence. Almost every client we've worked with in the last year has been very focused on this emotional intelligence. Now, in case you're not familiar with emotional intelligence, it's the opposite of IQ, right? It's not just about knowledge, it's about how you interact with others and how you understand yourself. So some of the components of emotional intelligence, the very first one is self-awareness. Are you aware of how you come across to other people? Are you in tune with your own emotions and what stresses you're dealing with and how you deal with those? And if you can have that self-awareness, then you're going to manage how you react to things better. You're also going to be able to empathize and read other people's feelings and how they're dealing with things better. So having a self-awareness is a component of emotional intelligence. Being self-motivated and driven is another component. Having very strong social skills is another component. And probably the biggest one is having empathy and connection with others. Maintaining that connection with your employees, with your customers, and not just the business aspect, but that personal aspect too. What are they going through? What are they dealing with? What are the stresses? Showing concern and understanding, and making sure that people feel safe when they're around you, when they're at work, whether that's working from home, working in a plant, working in an office, meeting with clients, that they feel safe and secure, and providing the resources they need to do their job. And what I mean about resources in this regards with empathy and connection, this has more to do with providing the resources or support they need emotionally or personally. So whether that's, someone who is caring for a loved one and maybe they need a bit more flexibility in their schedule, or understanding that you've got employees who have kids at home who need their help with schoolwork and staying online. And again, maybe you work out a flexible schedule, maybe there's some other things you can do to make that work, but it's every single person in the current situation has a different stress on them, and it's not the same. It's different person by person because everybody's dealing with this differently. And then just the whole isolation aspect. So being in tune with your team and the stresses they're going through, and everyone, actually others as well, but that empathy is going to give you that viewpoint of, okay, John's having a bad day today. Why is he having a bad day? Let's talk about that instead of just, jumping into assumptions. So I think that emotional intelligence has become more and more important as we deal with harder things. But in the end, what all of this does is it creates an environment where people feel open, safe, valued, and where they belong. And the reason for the importance of that, what's important about it is now you have a workforce that's engaged. So they still want to do a good job, even though they're not in their normal working environment. They can trust that they can be open about their situation and not feel condemned by it, which means they're going to watch out for themselves and others. Again, if we talk about the energy industry as a whole, the mantra for safety in the oil and gas industry is and has been for years: take care of yourself and your coworkers, right? Watch out for yourself, keep yourself safe, and keep your coworkers safe. The way that applies here is a much broader spectrum, and we need, but we're not going to get it if people don't feel secure that they can actually self-report that they're having COVID symptoms, or that that they feel comfortable going to get a test, and that if they actually have COVID, they're not going to have, I can't remember the word for this, but they're not going to feel outcast, or that they've done something wrong by catching COVID. That they can keep themselves and others safe by having the trust that they can be open about the illness and what they're going through, as well as all the other things: kids at home, someone's sick, loved one died, whatever it might be, that there's an openness and a trust inside so that everyone is safer as a result. So, it just creates a trusting environment, more likely to share problems, more likely to share solutions, and work together and be more collaborative. So emotional intelligence. So just those things that are most important in leaders, again, is emotional intelligence, strong communication skills, ability to motivate and empower, so an empowering leadership style, and then that strategic and commercial acumen with the twist of having some experience in adverse conditions or in crisis. So hopefully that gives you a sense. There are two items that I wanted to talk about specific to the energy industry. These are things that have already been embraced maybe by some others or are very specific. So I just wanted to mention these two things that are just a little different. The first one is the digital transformation. And digital transformation is something that the energy industry has been talking about for a long time. And definitely we see more work in that technology space, but it's so huge that we just haven't gotten where other industries are in terms of the digital transformation. The thing is, now it's been forced and been pushed with the work from home and the different ways we're using technology, which in some ways is a good thing because more leaders are embracing digital technology and the transformation. But it's imperative for companies because they see it is the future. And if we don't get on it and don't make these changes, we'll be left behind. So leaders have to believe in that digital transformation. And even if they haven't done it before, they need to be prepared to have a strategy to push that digital transformation in the companies they're in or the companies they're joining. If you have already done it or even parts of it in the past, that's even better. Companies will love it. But be thinking about that because it's here and it's coming. And that's why all of these big companies, Amazon, Microsoft, are in this space now because they see the opportunity for digital transformation in the energy industry. And then the second one is the energy transition, transformation, whatever you want to call it. Through the last 10 months with the changes in our travel patterns, particularly through the summer when there were fewer people on the roads, fewer carbon emissions as a result, and we started to see like clear water in Venice and less smog and all of these things, it was jumped on, right, by those people who wanted to see fewer carbon emissions and we're concerned about the transition. But it became more important, I think, or more visible. And you've seen companies and countries alike vowing to become carbon neutral by a certain time frame. So it's become a much more important part of our industry, which might feel threatening to the energy industry, but actually I think it's just a supplement. Oil and gas is not going to just go away. It will still be here, and there will be ways to, it will always be a part of the energy mix. But there is no doubt that electric cars and alternative energy and carbon capture is going to be a bigger part of the energy mix. And companies want leaders who recognize that and who can capitalize on it, right? Who can plan for that and be a part of it rather than just saying, no, I'm oil and gas and that's all I know, right? You've got to start pivoting and thinking that this will be part of the mix, and how do we move forward with that change and that transition rather than just sticking with what you know. So I wanted to make those 2 points because they are important and definitely something our companies, our clients are looking for.
Thank you very much, Mary. I think we can stop here with questions. I would like to, thank you again for the excellent talk. Thank you all, everyone, for the questions. Make sure to follow us up on LinkedIn and stay tuned for next editions.
All right, thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure to talk to all of you. Thank you very much.